Hey there, everybody. I am super excited for this episode of Stutter Stinker. It's a very special reprint edition. Unlike in the past, we had Stutter Stinker with cards that you guys will probably never see outside of the retro format, but I'm joined today by Richard Plummer, who is going to help me figure out, are these cards that are getting reprinted from the old Yu Yu Hakusho set studs or stinkers in their own format? And we might even do a little speculation on how they're going to perform in this upcoming Neo standard environment. But Richard, if you want to introduce yourself, give any plugs or shout outs you want to do so the people at home know who you are before we get started, go ahead and do so.
Okay, yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks very much for having me, Sam. I'm Richard. I'm obviously based in the UK. I'm part of, one half of the UK Versus podcast. Shameless plug. Go check us out on Twitch and YouTube with my partner in crime, Brett, that Dabby guy. I've been playing since sort of set one. I do have a little bit of a reputation on podcasts as being a bit of a retro hater. So this will be fun to see how, whether my card evaluation is up to scratch. It should be fun, and looking forward to it. And I'll say thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So the basic gist here is we're basically just going to be trying to decide if these cards were good or not in their original format. Obviously, we don't have any of the details for the upcoming current standard. It's all speculation so far, but I need you to tell me if these cards were a stud, which means was it successful in more than one single deck? It could probably be the same archetype, right? But I will say that a lot of these cards from Yu Yu Hakusho and printed after Yu Yu Hakusho, and specifically the ones that they're choosing to reprint, right? They're not trying to pick stinkers for reprints. So that actually made this a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I looked at the list and I went, well, a lot of these cards did get played, and they are sort of integral to a lot of their themes. Not every single one, but most of them were very played. So for this one, the studs are going to be cards that were, meta relevant in more than one deck, staples outside of their archetypes potentially. It's going to be a little more than just having appeared in a top cut list like we've done in the past. So to be a stinker, it's going to have to be something that was basically just an include only in its own character or its own one specific archetype and didn't see too much success. Does that make sense? Yeah,
totally.
Okay, and then the other rule is you can ask me any rules questions you want. You can ask me anything about the time frame. You cannot ask me, I've had people ask me, was this card played a lot? Like, that is kind of the point, right?
That's a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, it's kind of a giveaway, which granted, some of these cards do get played a lot and they are stinkers just because people are playing, their fun casual decks. So, it is kind of a valid question, but yeah, keep it to rules questions because, things like multiple or reversal might be throwing you off, which of course they're not in the reprints, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Cards that interact with those keywords might be important, but I'm ready to jump into it. Are you?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay, the first one, I figured I'd serve you up a softball. The character a lot of people are excited for, a very popular character from Yu Yu Hakusho. We got Botan being reprinted into new standard. She's a 625 Death Order Void character, has enhanced your attack. Your rival discards one random card and draws one card, and then responds twice per turn. After your attack deals damage, gain 2 health, and your rival loses 1 health. Richard, I'm asking you, was this character a stud or a stinker?
Oh, lordy. I trashed this character, I'm pretty sure, on our tier lists. Because I look at this and I okay, that top enhance is fine, but might actually beneficial and is kind of a do nothing. And the top response is nice. It's going to need a lot of discard matters, which I think there was back in the day. I'm going to say stinker. That's my gut feeling, and that's my gut feeling. It's not necessarily going to be relevant in a meta way as a reprint. So I'm going to say it was a stinker.
Okay, yeah.
These abilities didn't do enough.
Because she's kind of technically a standalone character from the set, they did reprint most of her stuff, right? So most of her cards do care about discard mattering, and they do a lot of the same things, but she doesn't have like a strict discard effect. You know, all of her effects let your opponent draw cards. So you're going to go Stinker on this one?
Yeah. I feel like just letting my opponent loot is a bad thing.
Yeah, that's true. It's but it is random, so they don't get to choose.
Yeah. My gut says Stinker, so that's what I'm going with. Like, yeah.
Okay, Stinker is locked in, and you are correct. Photon was a Stinker. The 625 health line was pretty damning, I think, personally. Once you get like, you know, 1 or 2 health down below 28, not a big deal. Once you get 3 health down, that's a whole partial block on a regular attack. And you're right, letting your opponent discard a random card and draw a card is not super punishing. She does a good job at punishing, you know, good players who are playing normally. And as soon as you kind of adjust your play and you understand that her kit requires you to discard cards, draw cards anyways, you're almost never going to keep good cards. And so if she wants to activate any of her synergies, she's going to make you discard bad cards and possibly draw into good ones, which not really a game plan you can strategize around.
Okay. We're off to a good start. I'm glad my evaluation of that was correct. Hopefully in the tier list as well, because I'm not convinced you're going to do much in new standard either. But yeah,
I was hoping that the response might throw you off because this character is pretty nice with reversal. So you get to do the gaining health. If you could gain, you know, 2 health 4 times over a turn cycle, get 8 health back. Obviously, the 25 wouldn't be as big of a liability. But it's not the easiest thing to do. But a reversal and then making your opponent discard a random card on their turn is also more powerful. So pretty good reversal character, but into a format without reversals, we'll see how she does.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Spirit Charged Kick. The 5 diff plus 0 low block. It's got the Yusuke 1 symbols, death, good, and life. It's a 4 high for 6, 3 check. As enhance your next attack this turn gets +1 damage for each resource symbol it shares with your character. And enhance your next attack this turn gets -1 difficulty. And it's got EX3 for a charge kick. I'm asking you, Richard, is this card a stud or a stinker? Or
so
was it, I should say.
Just looking at the complete package here, I quite like this. As a you know, it's a 5/3. It's got reasonable stats. It's off zone. It's got a really nice 0 low block rate. It's effectively sort of a little Curran Froggy with it, sort of giving the next one -1 difficulty, so it's sort of not counting to progressive for a bit. It's got the momentum out. I don't know how relevant charge and kick or like keywords that side, you know, are relevant, but obviously it is spirit, so I can see it being played in the spirit tribal decks. And, you know, passing across damage to this attack that you're playing, you know, not ignoring progressive at that point. I feel like this does enough to be good. Like I quite like it as the card, so I'm going to go with stud on this one. I think it as a full package of, you know, if you're playing sort of spirit tribal, you're going to be sharing a lot of symbols that share. So if you're passing along 2 to 3 damage on an attack that they sort of have to block because it's six big ones on there, and you can conceivably make it hard. You know, the -1 difficulty is nice, and like I said, the 0 low block is very, very good on this. So yeah, I think this is going to be a stud. I think it's just there's nothing necessarily on this that stands out on its own, but I think as a package it looks very good.
There's no conditions, right? There's no you have to meet 2 symbols. There's no hoop you have to jump through. This card is just always going to provide value to your next attack, right? Yeah,
like you're getting in minimum +1 damage, which is fine. Hopefully you're getting 2 to 3. You know, 4 high 6 isn't embarrassing on a 5 diff.
I guess I should ask you, how many decks for its time do you think we're playing attacks where they match multiple resource symbols with their character? Because I think the big thing here is your next attack getting between 1 and 3 damage, right?
Yeah.
So how often do you think characters are basically playing their own attacks or playing attacks that share multiple symbols with them?
Yeah, I mean that's where like I don't know how much the whole spirit tribal thing was a thing in the first Yu Hacker show. Obviously, it is for like Genkai and Yusuke in this set. So I don't know whether I can't remember what the effectively Yusuke One Dot did, whether he was like a spirit tribal guy.
He was spirit and symbols matter.
Yeah. Okay. So like he's almost this. I would imagine this gets played at least in Yusuke, right? So it depends whether there's multiple decks that are playing that sort of spirit tribal package.
Okay. So stud final answer?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a stud. I think the all-around package here is nice, and like I say, I really like the 0 low block.
All right. You went with stud for spirit charge kick, the 5 diff 4 high for 6, and you are correct. This one might be a little bending the rules that we talked about being in more than one archetype. This was definitely an auto include for almost every Yusuke deck, but I also saw it get played quite a bit in a lot of Spirit Shotgun decks in general, if only because Spirit Shotgun, as the retro reprint that we've all seen, cares about how many symbols you're sharing with your character overall. And now, don't get me wrong, that card was good enough to be played if it shared one symbol with your character, and so did all of your other attacks. You, of course, can put damage on it in other ways, but death and life is an incredibly common symbol pair in the game. Life and good is pretty common, and death and good is pretty common too, surprisingly. And so it's not super uncommon to have all of your attacks sharing 2 symbols with this attack. And for me, the thing that really put it over the top is in all of those decks, the EX3 was very, very important. Most of those decks had great ways to generate momentum, not a lot of great outlets for it. And I will be honest with you when I say that I have died to the EX Spirit Charge kick as often as I have died to the half damage of a shotgun.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I think as long as you're hitting that 2 damage threshold right on that enhanced, then you're happy. Like, 3's nice, but I think if you're hitting 2, you're happy. And, like, chaining these together is going to be really good, right? Like, you play the first, and they block. Okay, cool, I'll play the second, it's got extra damage, and now I'm going to EX this one.
Yeah, the Yusuke One Dot reduces the difficulty of your next attack based on how many symbols it shares with you. And so being able to chain together continuous difficulty reductions before playing your like ultimate move as a 2 difficulty plus progressive meant that playing Spirit Charge Kick felt really good. The +0 low diff felt really good. Putting 3 damage on a shotgun if you are Yusuke or happen to share 3 symbols, because I don't think there was anyone at the time that shared 3 with him, but there's definitely like retro characters that did. So yeah, I'm putting this one in the stud. It kind of just barely qualifies. It definitely rides the coattails of Spirit Gun and Spirit Shotgun a lot, but it was something you had to contend with in the metagame. You had to expect to see Yusuke's and Death Good Life Shotgun decks.
Okay, well, we're 2 for 2.
Doing pretty good so far, but the next one I think is going to be pretty tough. I think if you've been playing an MHA only, the Human Hunter might be a difficult one to suss out because it is a 1/5 +3 low block. It's got all chaos and evil, so the rando 1 symbols. This is a rando card. It's got response commit. After your attack deals damage, your next attack this turn gets +2 speed and +1 damage. That is its only ability, but it's a 1 difficulty foundation. Is this a stud or a stinker?
Man, yeah, this one's tough. Right, a commit for 2 speed, 1 damage is a solid rate, right? Especially on a 1 diff.
For contrast, right, in the set 1 of MHA, Momo had a 2 difficulty foundation that gave 2 speed and 1 damage only to weapon attack. So, or maybe it was 1 speed, 2 damage, but either way, it's very similar. But it was a 2 difficulty E commit that only worked for weapon attacks. This is a response commit, so it works with flash attacks. It buffs your next attack for if you have, first enhances that want to double damage and things like that. Double speed.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And then if you remember the rando cards like Rando Spirit Gun and Hate Fit, they have a sub theme, or I guess the main theme for rando was does your attack get a speed and a damage boost, right? So getting both stats was pretty important for all of his attacks, all except reduction, I guess, which gave both stats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's tough because, like, do I want to be adding effectively +1 difficulty to my next attack for +2 speed, +1 damage? Because having it as enhanced means you've got that choice where you can always like commit it to past checks, or it's like, actually I checked a 3 here, I don't have the resources to be able to commit this extra 1 for the stats, I just have to kind of let it go as it is. Whereas this is I have to sort of pay that cost up front and hope I check well.
Well, it's also one of those things where you're doing the response once you've already dealt damage to get knowledge about, you know, what is dealing this turn. And again, it's one of those things where it works with different attacks, basically, right? It works with attacks that care about what your first enhance is. It works with attacks that don't get enhanced steps. And I think what's really interesting about it is it works with attacks that if they need to have a speed and damage bonus to activate their effect, you can now do it as the first enhance, right? Like think about like a Twisting Azure Inferno type attack where it's like you have to modify the stats and then do an enhance. This can potentially lock your opponent out of getting to have that interactive back and forth. So I think that that's something to consider as well. Let me ask you, for the MHA formats that we've played in, is this a card that you would play on all Chaos or Evil?
I'm not overly convinced I necessarily would, you know. Like, obviously it would have been pretty good with something like your Dark Shadow Ruins, but that sort of, you get that double stats anyway. My gut says Stinker, because it's the cost here of effectively having to pay it up front rather than having that choice in your attack after you know what you've checked, and sort of having to sort of almost overcommit yourself, and it being gated to having that first attack deals damage, so your opponent knows about it, is on board, and they can sort of play around it. My gut says Stinker.
I do think
so. That's what I'm going to go with.
Okay. I do think the My Hero format has been a little spoiled with 1 difficulty foundations that flip for +2 speed or +2 damage. So that's very fair, right? Like I can say that for MHA format, I would not play this card specifically because of what you said, the cost, right? We have enough foundations in MHA that flip for 2 speed and a couple that flip for a damage or 2, not to mention we had tight-lipped, right? So getting stats on your spams wasn't the biggest deal, but this definitely does do it in a different way. But you're going Stinker here?
Yeah, like I think if it was a flip, I'd be a much more in. Like response flip, if the attack deals damage, your next one gets +2, +1. Probably too good. But if it was a flip, I'd be a much more in. But I think on a commit and paying that cost and sort of potentially overcommitting, like the block is fine as a low, but still a 3. Yeah, okay. I'm going to go Stinker, and I'm prepared to be wrong on this one.
All right, we're going Stinker with Human Hunter, the 1/5 stat pumper, and you are correct. This card was just not quite good enough. There were some notable players, some very good players who did include like a copy or 2 in their deck, because 2 speed and 1 damage for a 1 difficulty was a good rate back then. That was a good effect. And the fact that it's repeatable, that you can use it more than once, I would think did matter more back in the day. We did have lots of turn 2 kills, but we also had lots of games where having incremental value over multiple turns, turn 2 wasn't necessarily always the expected aggression turn. But yeah, having the commit cost made it never really work out for me personally. I've never seen it in as registered as more than a singleton copy in more than 1 top cut list, and it never really had any specific synergy There was just, players who recognize that for a one diff, it could be a little bit of a win more card, and that's kind of nice for a one diff.
Yeah, it's weird. I'd almost be more into it if it was E commit. If your previous attack dealt damage, get the stats. Because then you've got that information of knowing what you've checked, whether you can afford to commit the foundation to do it on.
Yeah, that would definitely be easier to use, a bit stronger. It wouldn't allow you to do certain synergies like we talked about, right? Yeah. Where if the first enhance needs a card that has both a speed and damage pump, then you still have to do it as your second enhance. Yeah, I think the main thing was for a lot of decks and for the format, by the time you deal damage, you might be already having to commit foundations to pass checks. And because nothing's guaranteed, Human Hunter gets committed pretty early, I think, once you're getting blocked.
Yeah.
Next up, we have a much talked about reprint. So I think you can have a pretty good read on this one, but we've got Genkai's Training 1/5, notably no block mod. With Yu Yu Hakusho, we've seen the return, cards without blocks, and I still get asked on Discord constantly by people that I'm coaching, how do I block with this card? The answer is you don't. You never get to block with it. That's just how it goes. Enhance commit. If you try to block this attack with a card that shares at least 2 symbols with your character, your block modifier becomes +0. So very reminiscent of the Determined Foundation, but notably this works with any card type, not just a foundation or attack. I think it is for Determined. And then Enhance Tenacious, discard a momentum, ready this foundation. Got Yusuke 1 symbols, death, good, life. I'm asking you, Richard, is this a stud or a stinker?
My initial reaction to this card is it might be a bit crack-a-lackers. Obviously the no block hurts, right?
Yes.
But these symbols are very much a symbols matter kind of pairings, right? You're playing that sort of spirit tribal, the Yusuke's, Genkai's and stuff of the world. And this is an E commit minus, usually it's going to be around the -2 to -3 speed effectively, right? You're talking about a 2 to 3 block modifier when you need it. Let's say between -1 and -3 speed, which is decent on a one diff. But then just having that momentum out of being able to have that on every single attack, just being able to say, okay, I built up a couple of momentum. I've effectively got this one foundation giving me, -2 to 3 speed on every attack, just at the cost of a momentum. We've seen how good release is, giving it effectively -2 speed on every attack for the cost of just a foundation, right? And this is a momentum. In some ways easier, in some ways harder.
Discard 1 momentum, ready this foundation used to be an effect we saw at least once per set. It's kind of a very, I don't want to say tacked on ability, but it's an ability that you would see very often, but you would most notably see it on spam foundations that either have a really conditional response, or it would have, another ability that you necessarily wouldn't use multiple times in a turn, like a flip cost. Kind of like Successful Results has a deadlock ability that flips, right? So I think it is a little rare to see it combined with a card that has an enhanced commit. But it is discard momentum, ready this foundation was a staple effect that you would see just kind of smattered around incidentally. It wasn't something you'd ever put I don't think you'd ever put a card in your deck because it said that, but it was a very useful effect to have miscellaneously strewn about in your deck.
Yeah, and this card works with that enhance very, very well on defense, and obviously it's fine on offense, right? If you're trying to string out, you can use it from that side of it. I think as long as there are enough decks that were getting at least -2 speed regularly off this, I think it was going to be good, and I'd imagine there was enough of that. So I think this will be good in MHA, not in MHA, in standards now, and I think it probably was a stud back then. Just E commit on a one diff for -2, -3 speed, repeatable. sounds really good to me.
Okay, are we going stud or stinker?
Yeah, I'm going to go stud. Yeah, I think this
Stud?
one would have been a stud.
All right, you went with stud for Genkai's training, and you would be correct. For Genkai's training, it is not the biggest powerhouse of a defensive one diff that we've had, but the main thing is that it shares symbols with some very nice block action. And the balancing factor for a lot of those blocks were that they had a +3 or even a +4 block modifier. And
like
so
your showdowns and face shields of the world, you know.
Exactly. Showdown and stop. Stop was a card that said after you block with this, remove it from the game and commit your rival's character. So if you had the good symbol and you'd shared 2 symbols with your character, Genkai's training could turn it into a +0 block modifier to allow you to block pretty much any attack early on and commit your rival's character at the start of their turn. Which was just a really powerful combo. The fact that you can ready it for momentum was a really powerful combo. Pretty much every deck is playing cards that share at least 2 symbols with them, right? So
yeah,
I will say, looking into early deck building for MHA, or not MHA, I guess new standard, but like, you know, looking at it with the current design philosophies, there is a lot more +1 block mods and a lot of +2 block mods that make it feel not quite as good as a different speed hate one div. But the fact that you can ready it, I think, will make it versatile enough to play it over other choices in the new standard. But also, back in the day, we didn't have an overload of +1 block mods on Foundation.
Okay.
So if you want to block with Foundations, Genkai's training was probably something that you need. Slides are glitching out. Okay. But we have another Foundation here. This one has Botan on it. It's reprinted as part of her kit. It's Aerial Recon. It's a 2 difficulty 4 control +2 mid block. It has response flip. After your rival discards a card during the combat phase, look at their hand. And then it has response once per turn, Tenacious. After your rival discards a card during the combat phase, ready this Foundation. So 2 responses with the same timing on the same card. That is something I don't think we've seen in MHA yet. Oh no, Excited for Blood. I take it back.
Yeah.
It's Excited for Blood-esque.
Man.
Is this a stud or a stinker of a 4-check?
Okay, so we've already established Botan was a stinker, so wasn't seeing much play, right? So the question is, was there much other discard going round? Because like you need to obviously have discard things, or the format be full of like snack times and things, right? Because obviously it can work off those.
True.
It feels like there must have been, just because they put that once per turn, right, on this, and they gave it the 4 check. So they were obviously a bit nervous.
Any card that's going to ready itself without costing you a momentum or like a permanent sort of resource was almost certainly going to have the once per turn on it, right? Like readying Amphibious multiple times a turn would be ludicrous, right? So once per turn, I think it's just because
there needs to be plenty of that discard for turn. You know, are you realistically triggering it twice per turn? Peeking at opponent's hand is, I think, an undervalued thing in the game. I think it's very, very powerful to know what they've got, whether that's on offense or defense, knowing what they're coming at you with or what they've got to defend with. I think it's undervalued, and I think it's very powerful. Obviously, readying, foundations that ready themselves, especially, at minimal cost or, conditionality, especially without a flip or anything like that. Again, it's very powerful. But the question is how much of the discard stuff was going around.
I mean, Botan makes you discard every attack.
Yeah, but we've already established he was a pooper.
Yeah, Botan was a stinker.
Yeah, so it's how much other like, and where people were maybe playing some of her kit that do the thing, right?
Have you ever seen
combos with this card?
Have you ever seen the card Downward Spiral?
No.
Okay, good. This is gonna be a pretty tough one.
Okay.
What do you think? Your opponent discards a card for any reason. You get to ready this and then optionally look at their hand.
Yeah. Oh man. I'm gonna go with Stinker just because Botan was a stinker, and I'm gonna say there wasn't enough of this effect going round for it to be worth the 2/4. I'm gonna say there wasn't enough of it being played. I think if there was plenty of this incidental effect, or there were other characters and strategies that were doing the discard thing, then I think this would have gone in them. I'm going to say my gut feeling there says there wasn't enough of that, because I don't think it's something what they would have put all over the place to make this worth playing. So I'm going to say Stinker.
Stinker, final answer.
Yeah.
We've got Aerial Recon, the 2/4 with two different responses, coming in as a stinker.
Oh man, I'll keep it going.
Yeah, we've got a perfect record so far, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so Aerial Recon, I think, has all the makings to be a really big deal in MHA, but there was not a ton of discard costs being paid, like for cards like Snack Time. There was one with Nature, but it was nowhere near as ubiquitous as it was for its MHA format, right? And also, getting to look at your opponent's hand after they won with Nature U probably doesn't help, because they're probably just going to send unblockable attacks at you. And then the discard decks that did exist did not need to look at your hand because you did not have a hand.
Yeah.
So I do think Aerial Recon could have been... So the big discard attack at the time was Downward Spiral. And it basically was a 5/5 that could make your opponent discard like 2 cards throughout it, and then got bonus damage based on how many cards both players were missing from their hand. And so it was not unusual for discard decks to attack you on turn 1 after you built 5, make you discard your last 2 cards, and then add like 7 to 8 damage to itself. And so it was never really concerned about passing checks or looking at your hand. It would just make you discard your hand and kill you with 2 attacks.
Okay. But yeah, in new standard, obviously this is share symbols with Mop Strike, right? And I think that's going to be a thing.
Yes. Also,
shares back go 4.
Yeah. Also, Foundation readying was not as big of a deal. Having a 2/4 that readied itself was not quite as big of a deal in this format, because we had like a 3-diff that could destroy any foundation to ready any other foundation. These symbols were not like particularly good at it. So but in the current design philosophy, readying a foundation is so good that we've started to put it only on 3-diffs and 2/4s. So this was kind of ahead of its time, I feel.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be all over the place. But I think if you're doing the thing, this could be, you'd quite happily play a couple of these.
Yeah, I think Mop Strike is coming up in this list, so we won't talk too much more about Botan card.
Okay.
We will move on to the next one. Yeah, it's Mop Strike. We got another Botan card coming up, so I wanted to move on before I start talking too much about the whole kit and caboodle. But this one is a 4 difficulty, 4 high for 4, +1 mid block. It has Desperation 3. So for any of you at home who don't know, Desperation says if you are below half health, the new print, I don't think it's printed anymore. It used to change to the printed value, which didn't make sense, but the new difficulty of this attack becomes 3. So if you're below half health, it's a 3 difficulty move, and it has enhanced discard a card. Your rival discards 1 random card. Both players get to draw a card, and then enhance if your rival has discarded a card this turn, draw a card. Richard, I'm asking you, do you think Mop Strike was a stud or a stinker back in the day?
So I think this will be good in new standard. Like, discard 1, draw 2, and then your opponent sort of, messes with your opponent's hand. Like, I don't want to be doing that just as a thing on its own, like just the Botan thing. But tacked on to me getting to do it, I'm fine with it. It's got a 1 mid block. It's got that Desperation 3. I think weapons will be more of a thing in New Standard. And like a 4 high forward, a 4 diff, or possibly a 3 diff is not embarrassing. Okay. So I think it'll be good in New Standard. Was it good in Old Standard? Probably just as part of a, just it's a value attack, right? And just, I don't know what the propensity of card draw was back in Old Standard, like how easy it was to get cards. But yeah, just having that hand filtering on top of an attack that you can just put a few stats on and they have to respect it. And possibly messes with their hand, triggers possibly anything you've got based on discarding cards. So either of you, I think it's got enough and is generically good enough that it probably was a stud.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I'd go with stud for this one. I think it's probably just generically good enough.
Okay, generically good enough. You said it yourself. Discard a card, draw 2 on a 4 high 4. That sounds pretty good to me. It's certainly overperforming in my early MHA testing.
Yeah.
But Mop Strike Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I'm worried this is the trap. This is the one that's going to be good in Standard, but was a stinker in Old stuff. But I'm going to go with it being stud in the Old one, in Old Standard.
Okay, Mop Strike as a stud. You are correct. This one also, I don't know what's going on with my, slideshow here. Yeah, so stud, mostly because it found a home in a lot of different decks. This was not beholden to its own archetype. It wasn't a super powerhouse of a card, and it wasn't something that people were playing around. But at the same time, it was good enough that it made its way into many, many different decks. And I would say back in the day, making people discard a random card when their defense was hinged around like one really important reversal or one really important action, like that stop action we talked about earlier, that had a lot of like hidden value. It was definitely like a flow card, as you could think of it. It was a set up consistency piece. I think it was really popular for Ken players. I think Ken 2 is a character who's all about going really fast, being hyper aggressive. He pretty much can't afford to brick ever because he's, burning himself up. He's like the Dobby 2 of his generation, basically. So he really can't afford to take a turn off. And he had a really nice void weapons kind of a package going. So it really did shine in aggressive decks that need to see their key pieces. But I also saw slower decks like Yoshimitsu, who has an ability that lets him draw 2 cards on his own turn when he checks a weapon, right? He would play that with Mop Strike, and all of a sudden your 5-hand size gets to see 9 new cards. And that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So this one makes it to a stud, not because of its competitive performance necessarily, but because there was lots of different decks on its symbols that were willing to put in a flow slot and a consistency slot. Wasn't wearing the massive damage that I think you're going to see it wear in MHA. I think in MHA, any card that draws a card and is 4 difficulty is playable, and any card that draws a card and has 4 speed or more is playable.
It was the future charge of its day.
Oh yeah, still I would say it's still better than Future Charge. Yeah, Future Charge saw success in like a couple of decks, and they're mostly I think it was mostly life decks, but yeah, definitely a similar idea. Next up we have okay, I need to figure this out. Next up we have Hate Fish. Hate Fish is a 4 diff, 1 low for 7. +2 low block. It has ally and safe. Safe just means you can't play a reversal to it. All chaos evil symbols. So it's a rando 1 reprint. And it says double the next speed or damage bonus this attack receives. Only playable if this card is immediately preceded by an attack or face down card. So what that basically meant was they wanted to give the combo keyword to things like Rando Spirit Gun and this card. But by the rules, combo doesn't work with face down attack. So this was their way of letting Rando kind of combo off of his own face down, which you've now seen with Toya Setsuno's attack, Borrowed Goods. They just don't care. They just changed the rules and said, you can combo off of a face down because it says combo face down, right? Like, we understand what the point of the card says. And then the other ability is enhance if your rival's at desperation, it gets +2 speed. So on its own, if your rival's at desperation, it's a 5 low 7 for 4 difficulty. Pretty solid. But you can do a lot of stuff with that top enhance. So I'm asking you, Richard, was this a stud or a stinker?
It sure is big, right? 7 damage on the 4 diff is a bajillion. And maybe the low speed wasn't so bad because it was safe. So, even if they blocked it, you weren't getting reversaled.
I do think that's the reason for it to be a safe attack, was that they printed a 1 speed and said, well, the least we can do is not serve up a free reversal.
Yeah, exactly. It's effectively a 5 diff, right? You really want to be playing and getting the bonus of the pseudo combo.
True, you do have to have a way to get a card in front of it.
Yeah. But you just, any old attack into this and it's can they block it? You obviously you can't rely on them being a desperation. You need some other sort of speed pump to get that extra.
There were cards that would put your rival into desperation. They say your rival's considered to be at desperation.
Okay.
So theoretically, you could do this while your rival's at full health. It would just require a combo.
Okay. This one I definitely think I could be getting wrong. I'm gonna say stud, because that is a lot of damage on a 4 diff. 7 damage on a low is a lot of damage. And just knowing you're not getting reversaled,
have you
there's going to be other speed pumps. If you can get a 3 speed pump from somewhere and just say, now this is a 7 low 7 on a 4 diff catch. I'm going to say stud, and I'm prepared to be wrong on this one because I haven't really worked out how to quite evaluate this in the current standard, whether it is actually good or not. So even less so for old standard, but I'm going to say stud because it's 7 damage, and 7 damage kills people.
Okay. Stud on the Hate Fish, the 1 low 7 doubling bonuses, and it is unfortunately a stinker.
I broke the streak.
Yeah, we had a perfect record. We almost made it. I think we're more than halfway through, but unfortunately, Hate Fish just had a few too many hoops to jump through. It's an attack that I would say doesn't affect the board state. And like is common with a lot of older card games in general, card games that have a board state that is kind of the predominant method of operation, right? Unlike our card pool and the way that we attack, and unlike the way that you would attack in a Flesh and Blood style game, affecting the board state used to be a lot more important than just raw stats. Whereas in MHA, I could see this being I keep saying MHA, but new standard, I could see this being very, very playable. If your rival just doesn't have a low block and younger Taguro says, I'm going to add 10 damage to this, it's a 1 low for 17, but he's really calling his shot that you don't have that low block, right? And I think in the new standard, it could be very, it could be a very useful stat stick, but back in the day, it just wasn't that impressive to have one really big attack, especially if like you said, you'd have to fix the speed on it, but it's much easier to get big damage pump. So it's kind of difficult to decide how exactly am I going to lean into this attack. But it was a brewer's favorite. There are a lot of different meme combos with this card that are aimed at getting it to be a 30 damage OTK one-shot kill.
Okay.
So I do expect it to see a lot more play in the future, but in the past, it was a stinker.
It's definitely a puzzle to be solved there. So I can imagine it being that kind of Brewer's Paradise type card.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to click now. I'm gonna see if clicking fixes. Okay, I think it's me using my keyboard to navigate that's glitching out the slideshow. But okay. So yeah, Brewer's Paradise for Hatefish. I'll be really interested to see where it ends up. But moving on, we've got 16 instant slashes, 5 difficulty, 5 speed, 5 damage, 3 control, +2 high block, Fury weapon. It's got Chaos, Fire, Void, which were the original Hiei's symbols. And it's got a Hiei enhance. If you have exactly 16 cards in your discard pile, this attack is unblockable. And then it has first enhance. This attack gets 1 speed and 1 damage for each of your momentum. And then it has another first enhance. Your next check to play an attack gets +X. X equals your momentum. So 2 different effects that care about your momentum and an effect that cares about your discard pile, but it has the opportunity to get really big, really fast, and even be unblockable. Do you think that this card was a stud or a stinker?
So when I read this card and I look at that top enhance, I just immediately look at that as blank text, right? The chances of you lining up 16 cards in your discard, plus drawing this, plus maybe having some momentum to actually make a 5 damage thing actually be relevant. I just think that's just blank text, and I have no idea whether original Hiei was actually any good or playable at all. Obviously,
you know what he does?
Not a clue.
So he has enhanced discard the top 2 cards of your deck, basically mill 2. This attack gets +2 speed. If it deals damage, look at 1 random card in your opponent's hand. So similar to one of the Chi Hasaikai guys. I forget his name right now.
Shin Nomoto.
Yeah. So similar to Shin Nomoto's response, tacked on to a mill 2 +2 speed enhance. And then his other ability was he can look at he can look at any player's momentum, his own momentum, and face down foundations whenever he wants.
Okay. That doesn't sound great.
It's very thematic, but it slows the game down a lot.
Yes.
Granted, we have more face down foundations now than we used to, and we let you look at your own momentum now anyways, so...
So the making a big damage if you've got some momentum, sure. Like you can maybe make this like an 8 mid-8, which is fine. Or, you give your next check +3, which is fine. It's very mid. Like I just think the entire package here, nothing stands out as something I really want. Like if I want a big attack, there's better options that don't necessarily limit it to a first enhance. If I want a check hack, I'm sure there's better options for that. And yeah, like I said, I think that first enhance is just blank text. It doesn't block itself. There's an instant red mark against it. I'm going to say stinker on this one. Okay. I just think it's unexciting. Yes, it can get big if you manage to generate the momentum, but sure, I'd imagine there's plenty of those sorts of bombs that actually do more for you. I'm going to say stinker. I'm not a particular fan of this card.
Okay. 16 instant slashes. We said it's a stinker. It was back in the day, actually. Oh, I gotta click now. I'm just gonna do the keyboard again. It's a stinker. It was a stinker. This was a favorite pet card of mine. It's something that I would play Hiei explicitly for, and I will say the top enhance is easier than you think. The 16 cards, managing your discard pile when your character mills intentionally, and the effective mill that we had made it surprisingly easy to hit 16 cards on turn 2 or turn 3 if you were very mindful of it. But yeah, after a turn 2 attack turn, especially since your character has to mill to get their stats, it's very unrealistic. And then the main thing is it's got 3 hoops to jump through, but you can only ever choose to jump through 2 of them. But that makes this card pretty bad. Hiei himself had some momentum generation, but not enough to make it matter. But I will say, one of my favorite combos in the game was to make this attack unblockable. And then there is a card called Fight Like You Mean It, which says if this attack is not blocked, the next attack is unblockable and it gets 4 damage. So the combo was make this one unblockable. It doesn't matter that it's a 5/5. Make the next one unblockable and then play something really, really big like a Hate Fish or something that you can like pump to 30 damage. So I had a lot of fun brewing with this one, but I have to admit it's a stinker.
Okay.
But it was very funny when you said the top part is basically blank, and I'm like, that's the only reason to play the card, unfortunately.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, again, it's a meme and a dream to live for, and I like it from that perspective, but just from it being remotely competitive viable, I think just a no. Yeah,
definitely a meme and a dream, but what is not a meme is Thunderous Roar. We're coming up, I think we only got 2 cards left, so this should be the penultimate card here. Thunderous Roar, 3 difficulty, 5 control, plus 4 mid block. Enhance commit, your attack gets 1 speed for each of your rivals' face down foundations. Then if you have 30 or more cards in your discard pile, it gets an additional plus 1 speed for each of your rivals' face down foundations. Air, Earth, Fire are the symbols. Is Thunderous Roar, or was it, a stud or stinker?
Lordy. Like the 3-4 line at the top says that they were sort of a bit worried about this, right? So they've balanced it that way.
Well, Byakko specifically cares about having high difficulty foundations.
Right, okay.
But he himself never cared about the block mod. So that might be relevant. Like, he cares that it's a 3 diff, but he doesn't care that it's a plus 4 block.
But like e-commit for, and I know Byakko does flippy stuff, right? So like if you're getting +3 to +4 speed out of this consistently, then I think I'm happy to play that rate.
Okay.
Byakko could easily be getting like 8 speed out of this, right? He's flipped 4 things, he's milled himself up out the wazoo, he's got 30 cards, commit +8 speed. I'm happy with commit for +8 speed, right?
I did play against Thunderous Roar Byakko on stream the other day, and I will say that Thunderous Roar never committed for less than 14 speed.
Yeah. The question is was there enough generic flip stuff in the format in terms of people just, paying costs with like, your tight lips or flipping your own chivalrouses and things like that, people were, or building face downs with jab, was there enough of those sort of effects in the format? And were there anyone else that's doing the self-mill thing, right? Obviously, I think it would have been, you play it in Byakko, but was it then more meta-relevant outside of him? The 3 diff is a cost, the 4 mid is a cost. I'm going to say, like, probably in an average game, you'd probably get enough speed out of it that you probably don't go necessarily all in this, but I would imagine it would see an amount of play. So I'm going to say stud.
Okay.
Like, if you're e-commit 3 speed, I'm happy with that. Like, on a 3, it's fine. But the potential to be getting e-commit 14 speed makes this, I think, worthwhile the slot. So I'm going to say stud.
Okay. Going stud on the Thunderous Roar. It gets effectively 1 speed for each face down, or 2 speed if you're playing a self-mill deck. It is, in fact, a stinker. Oh, I keep forgetting I have to click now. Unfortunately, Thunderous Roar was just a little bit too slow for its format, I think. And there wasn't too many characters that were able to do the turbo flip gimmick, I guess you could say. And then the other part that goes along with Thunderous Roar is there was lots of reset to 0 speed. So that was pretty powerful. There was decent enough like destruction outlets. So if you keep destroying your face downs, then your rival won't be able to count them. So things like that. All in all, it was just a little too slow. It was very good for the Byaku style deck, right?
Yeah.
And it was very good for the main thing is you had to really do self mill and you had to do turbo flip. And the only character that was really doing both was Byaku. And Byaku was in a format that was not very kind to five-handers in general. Even though he did have some really nice gimmicks that he could. So Thunderous Roar, I think, is a very strong foundation for what it does, but it does exactly one thing, and it doesn't do it with any protection.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, it's just that I'm thinking, I guess, more of like our sort of MHA formats where, you know, we end up with these kind of earth decks and stuff that just have constant face down stages anyway. So
right. And there's so much more flipping your own stuff in the recent design philosophy. So that's a part of it too, is you probably weren't flipping your own stage as often as people do now, combined with the fact that, you know, when I played against Thunderous Roar, I told you it committed for 14 speed minimum. That's because every card in my Void deck flips for cost. So he was getting to those numbers playing only a couple of attacks. But what's your record? I think 7-2. That's pretty good.
I think Rex and 2. I think we got that one and Hatefish wrong, right?
Yeah, which again, to be fair, those are both cards that have massive numbers that I genuinely think will be way better in the Neo standard compared to the previous standard. Those are probably maybe the two biggest that stand to have a glow up. Maybe Mop Strike, because Mop Strike will go from being like a stud because it helped a wide plethora of decks like find their strategy to I think it will be the star of a deck soon. So pretty good so far, I would say. Maybe the best record we've ever had for Stud or Stinker. I should have kept track. I should have kept like a scoreboard, but we're on to the final one. How are you feeling? Are you feeling confident?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be with X and 2, right? I mean, yeah, I'm happy.
Well, I almost made a bad joke, but we'll move on to the last one.
I think I almost made the same one as well.
Yeah, let's move on to the last one here. It is Keiko's Aid. This is a 2/5 +3 high block. It has one ability with USK1 symbols. Response flip. After you block an attack, your rival's next attack gets +2 difficulty. Is this card a stud or a stinker?
I like this card. Flip for Breaker 2 seems really nice to me, just at whim when you need it. My gut says stud, and like I want to be playing this in decks that can play it on symbol in new standards, like just as a defensive piece to say flip, just stop, please.
Just stop.
I love my Ice Storms, and my learning the standards, things like that. I like just stop buttons. So flip for, and it's only a flip, and just for an effective Breaker 2. And you can obviously it's a +2 difficulty, so your anti-breaker things don't stop it, and you can. I'm just thinking what this symbols with in terms of other breakers, but obviously you can stack it with other breakers, right? So
right. I'll say this: this card is 1000% a stud in the Neo standard. That's easy.
Yeah.
Going forward, this is exactly the kind of thing that defense like lived and died off breakers for years. Blocking was like the only way to really play defense, and decks found they printed ways to deal with breaker, right? And decks were always able to just play a 0 and then continue attacking you 90% of the time. And this card gets around a lot of those strategies, so I can say easily this will be a stud in the future. But we got to think about the past. How good could this card be in the past when you've got cards where like Hatefish isn't good enough?
Yeah, I still think just a stop button is good on board. I think there was enough where you want to be blocking because you want to be maybe reversaling or doing other things. So I think you automatically want to block. So I think just The only thing that maybe would have put it off in the time is maybe the stat line was a little bit overcosted for the time. I don't know, like a 235. I think it's a powerful effect.
It also has exactly one ability. It does one thing. Yes. And it's a responsive thing, right?
Yeah.
If you are playing in like a control matchup and your opponent's not attacking you more than once, this card could lose a lot of value. So you got to think in the Neo standard design, everything is a string deck. Everything is a play a whole bunch of attacks deck. But that wasn't always necessarily the case in the past.
No. But I think this is a generically good enough effect to have that, sure, you're not jamming 4 in every deck on these symbols, but I think it's like one of those ones where it's like, I would imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if like 1 to 2 copies found themselves just in a lot of decks on a lot of these symbols, right? As just, I like having this effect for when I come up against the matchups. It's good enough. And when it's not, sure, it's a 3 high, ain't great, but I'm only playing a couple. This isn't like a 4 of, this is like a 1 or a 2 of, but I think it's generically good enough that it saw widespread play. So I'm going to say stud.
Okay, stud, final answer for Keiko's Aid?
Yeah, we'll see if we go X2 or X3.
That could be a big difference in a tournament. Let's see if Keiko's Aid was a stud or a stinker, and it was a stud. I think the biggest thing going for this card in the past was its symbols. It had amazing block responses. We talked about stop earlier. Stop has the good symbol. It had lots of really nice reversals that you could play along with it, including Keiko's Slap, if you've seen that card. Keiko's Slap is a reversal that says if it deals damage, your rival's next attack gets +2 or +3 difficulty. So between Keiko's Aid and playing the reversal, not only does your opponent have to block and add a card to their card pool to prevent more difficulty hacking, I guess you could say, they would still have to always deal with that +2. It's got symbols with card pool stuffing from the death symbol and the life symbol. I think had a little, but like reversals and card pool stuffing defensively was a thing. The death symbol and the symbol I played it the most on was in a Lord Raptor deck. There's a deck where Lord Raptor 2 says all your flash attacks get breaker 2. Just blanket. Okay. So every time you blocked with an attack in that deck, you had breaker 2, and then you stack a bunch of Keiko's Aids on top of it, and it was the best deck for telling your opponent, like you said, just, hey, it's time to stop attacking. So for all of those reasons, this felt like an underplayed card at the time. I don't know if it was an automatic include for most people on these symbols. There was a whole lot more diversity in deck building, much less staples. But this card was unequivocally a stud, specifically because unlike Breaker, you cannot play cards around it.
Yeah.
So, and that is the main reason why I think it will be a stud going forward into the new standards. So you ended up 8-2. That's a very good record.
Yeah, as someone who's not played any of these old formats, I'm very happy with an 8-2. Like, I'll take that any day.
Did not mean to go all the way back there. I think that's a really good record. You were really nailing it in the beginning there. You got tripped up by, what was it, Hatefish? And what was the other card? Thunderous Roar, right? So
yeah.
Those are pretty tough because, again, those are cards that I think that will be good in the upcoming standards. So when it comes to the future of the format, I think that those cards do have a lot of potential to be studs, at least more than they did in the past. But I think you did an amazing job. I thought about putting the retro reprints on here, but I feel like the retro reprints have had like a visceral reaction. I don't know. Have people been talking about them in the UK at all?
Not too much, I don't think. I know Brett wants to get himself the Taguro Brothers ones. But yeah, like I don't know how, because like certainly obviously the universe is much bigger sort of up north in the UK. And most of the people I know are just sort of MHA heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see sort of how those 5 reprints sort of affect sealed play and limited. But they look really nice. So
yeah, the design and the layout is super good. I am a little worried about the impact that they'll have on like the occasional draft pod. You know, if it's like 1 per pod, I think that's too much. But if it's less than that, then it's gonna feel even worse, right? If it's like in a 1 in 10 pods have a retro reprint, and then you're the guy that gets to lose to Spirit Shotgun, that's not gonna feel great. But there are some nice answers to the retro reprints for limited as well. There's more than 1 card that removes an attack from the game in the Yu Hakusho set. So if you're really getting bullied by Spirit Shotgun, hopefully that's in your. Hopefully you're not also. Hopefully they didn't also draft the Taguro brothers, because that's probably the most insane card. And but yeah, I felt like the retro reprints would have been a little too obvious, because I'm gonna spoil it for you. All 4 are studs. All 4 were format defining. All 4 were staples on their symbols. They were things that you built entire decks around, like abusing. So originally, another reason I didn't do it is True Identity got a revamp. I didn't include any cards that got changed. I didn't want to have to like bring up the old version and the new one, right? But so True Identity used to not be a first form. So every time you readied it, you could form commit for +1 to your checks. And every time you built it, like people would destroy one and build it back in and reuse it that way. There was a lot of cards that would like basically build there's a lot of Tasty Rift style cards that had like some cost you could pay to build a foundation. And so there was entire deck archetypes that were basically just, can I use True Identity 3 or 4 times in a turn and never have progressive difficulty?
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, I think the last time I played Retro with True Identity, I was playing a Twisting Azure Inferno True Identity deck. I played my 5th attack for the turn with +7 to my check. So I had -2 difficulty. I can't fail it. Like -2 difficulty, no progressive. It's on a 3. And that was a deck I got top. I think I ended up in top 16. It was either top 8 or top 16. But I played that deck at Worlds 2020. It was a rough draft, taken off the top of someone else's desk. They just slapped it together. And the whole premise was, can I ready True Identity? And that card alone got me to a top 8 or a top 16 at Worlds. Like,
nice.
So it definitely defined a format. Shotgun defined a format. Spirit Gun defined a format with it. Yusuke, of course, uses those cards. So got to imagine he defined a format. But Taguro Brothers was the most obvious inclusion because it's an action that leaves your card pool. So any deck with a symbol on Taguro Brothers probably played at least one of them.
Yeah.
So as much as I wanted to include the retro reprints, I chose not to.
They're gimmies.
Huh?
The only one I probably wouldn't have been sure about would have been Yusuke. Like, just because characters, I'm never sure like were they relevant, because like they could have just brought him back because it's Yusuke and it's, you know,
that's true,
right?
Well, and Yusuke he wasn't the most obvious out the gate, because in the beginning anyone could play Spirit Gun. And if you're familiar with the errata to Spirit Gun, they made it so it's only Yusuke can destroy foundations with it.
Right.
So he became a lot more popular after the errata, because before there was a lot of people playing Yusuke because he's strong and he's easy and we like Yusuke. But then he became the only guy who can play the most broken attack in the format at the time. There's a nationals called the Spirit Gun Nationals, because it was just which deck is playing Spirit Gun the best, right? And so after that nationals, it got the errata and it became Yusuke only. So he became more popular after that, but I would definitely still consider him like a meta staple for most of his time.
Okay.
But I had a whole lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always fun to sort of put the the brain to the test and sort of see whether my evaluation skills are up to scratch. And I think I did well enough. So yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. And yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. I had tons of fun. I'm going to ask you one last question. Which of these cards that we talked about today are you most excited to play in the new standard?
I mean, it's boring, but it's Mop Strike.
Yeah, it's a little boring, but man, that card is so good.
Yeah, although it doesn't fit in the one. I've only brewed one deck so far, and it doesn't fit in that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I've played it. I've been jamming 4 of it on every deck I've made with a symbol that shares it, and it has never felt bad to play.
Yeah, no, the only deck I've brewed so far is Mono Flash Djinn.
Okay, I played some Mono Flash Djinn, and that was the deck that I flipped all my foundations against Thunderous Roar. And he was like, well, it's not below printed anymore, so I guess I'll enhance on my attack. And I was like, yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah.
Well,
but yeah, I'm excited to get into new format and start brewing and start looking at stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, it's looking really good. I think the upcoming format, as far as the cards go, the cards in the format look super, super good. So I'm excited to brew some more decks. I'm excited to play some more games. But that's going to do it for us today. I want to thank you all for watching this on YouTube. Make sure to check out UK Versus. You can give your plugs one more time.
Yeah, thanks so much. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks everyone for watching. Obviously, do all the like, comment, subscribe for Sam. And yeah, come check us out. UK Versus, YouTube, Twitch. We stream, we do a podcast pretty much every Sunday, sometimes on Tuesdays. So yeah, come check us out.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to all the pages. You already did all that. We're gonna go for now. Have fun in the future, and I'll see you guys at the Wish tournament, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the future. Peace out, everybody.
See you later.